So you and I were chatting last year about AI interviewing and the compliance and legalities around it, right? Because it's not one of the things I think that
Mhm.
TA teams are faced with today is that candidates are mass applying, candidates are AI bot applying, whatever they're doing. There's no regulation, there's no compliance. They can do whatever they want. And as teams, we have both our hands tied behind our backs as the fire hose comes at us. So I remember I was chatting, we're talking about the legal team saying, well, there is something about AI doing it where it's got guardrails and it's recorded and it's transcribed and it's reviewable,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
There's
So
I mean, there's a great partner that, we're working with, and there's lots out there in this field that you can do from a compliance perspective, but Fair Now, like, the one thing that I like about them is they introduced, pre-validation synthetic data, right? So we could say, "Hey, let's actually have our legal team define the biases that we wanna validate against, that we wanna look at, that they're concerned about, and let's run this through at, using all, previous candidate data and see exactly how it would screen and recommend them and do it out. See what our slate looks like compared to how the human reviewers, to Tim's point, non-review was doing because we're only touching, 1% of overall applications. So there's a lot of great things out there now that I think legal and compliance teams are really excited about that's getting them more behind AI because when it was first all coming out, there was too much, right? That they're like, I don't know how it's scary at face value. But I was like, now that there's more and more tools coming out in the AI community to say, like, hey, you can put an ethical framework around this, you can put an audit framework around this, you can actually test and validate this stuff, and it's defensible. So now we actually get to prove what a lot of us were saying was like, we actually think this is more fair. Like, yep, there's a risk of bias, but now we get to prove and validate against it and put a stamp on it before we deploy it.
well, there's a risk of bias before, right?
Yeah.
That didn't go away.
There's always
Chris,
a risk, but before it was just kinda like, we know there's bias anecdotally. Now
yeah.
we can be like, let's actually track and see how the bias is for here's the candidate pool versus actually the action that's happening in the system.